Welcome back to the cybersoul.io podcast, real talk for a hacked up world. Today's guest is someone who knows startups, scaling, and taking on giants of tech. Jeff Reedy is the Chief Marketing Officer at Scale Computing, formed through the acquisition of the original Scale Computing and Acumera. In this role, Jeff leads global marketing strategy for the combined businesses, the leader in edge computing and re-virtualization, with more than 100,000 deployments running hundreds of thousands of workloads and applications worldwide. Jeff was the CEO and co-founder of the original Scale Computing, where he guided the company from startup through growth and into its position as a market leader. Prior to Scale, he co-founded and led Corvagio, an email security company that pioneered the use of AI to block spam, which he took from inception through funding and to acquisition. He holds a degree in computer science from Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology. But what makes Jeff stand out isn't just the track record, it's the culture that he's built. People love working for him. I've heard it firsthand. And in an industry often marked by burnout, that's very rare. Jeff, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you. So let's get into edge computing because I know it was a new concept for me, and I've worked in technology for a very long time. For someone who's not very deep into IT, how would you explain what edge computing really is?
Yeah, so the simplest explanation, edge computing means you're going to have servers outside the data center, right? So the data center could be the cloud, the data center could be a traditional regional data center, but what we're talking about here is you have some applications that for a variety of reasons you need to run elsewhere, right? At a restaurant, grocery store, on a ship, on a truck, as or a remote office, branch office even. But I mean, typically we're talking about these kind of like very small environments. And by being away from the data center, it means you're typically also away from IT resources hands-on, right? Something breaks, there isn't somebody in the other room that can walk in and fix it. So that's one of the big challenges with edge.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for explaining that. So why is the edge such a critical battleground right now for IT and for cybersecurity?
Well, in IT generally, you have a trend where with the rise of things like AI, and AI could mean, large language models like we all like to play with now, but it also means a lot of computer vision, using video and doing AI analytics. For both of those use cases, it's often far more efficient to run those yourself, right? I mean, you could imagine I've got use the gas station example. I've got 5,000 gas stations in a franchise. The internet connection to those gas stations is whatever the local equivalent to a Comcast cable modem is at best. Might even be like old school, like not Starlink, but old school satellite connectivity. I'm not going to be streaming, cameras from all 30 gas pumps into the cloud, running analytics and sending stuff back down, right? I'm going to probably run that locally. In other cases, sometimes latency is a problem. So, we joke, one of the jokes we have in Edge is, when microseconds matter, the cloud is only 88 milliseconds away. Right. Which, and it's true. We have customers in manufacturing, for example, where there's things coming down in some kind of line, and they have to get an answer out of the system as to whether the part is within spec or not within less than 1 millisecond in order to eject the part. Otherwise, it's past the little thing that knocks the part out. Well, again, the first hop to the internet is more than a millisecond away, so you need that low latency capability. So there's a lot happening there, and of course, then mixed in is everything that's happened with my friends over at VMware, which has also caused a lot of ruckus in that world. So,
And that's perfect. So let's go right over to your your pastime of I don't know, your relationship with VMware. Let's put it that way.
yeah. I mean, I joke because I do a lot of memes and I poke a lot of fun at Broadcom VMware. But no, the reality is that since Broadcom acquired VMware, the focus of that company has changed tremendously. I mean, VMware was a product effectively ubiquitous in in IT. And I was a competitor of theirs, right? I mean, Scale's been a competitor of VMware since our inception. But VMware had... But the reason I started Scale is because VMware had 98% market share. And I'm like, well, somebody else should compete with them, right? But VMware was a very good... Yeah, right, exactly. But VMware's a very good company, right? Good product, good company, and people used it for decades. Well, then Broadcom has come in and changed the business model. Broadcom's focus is on the enterprise version of enterprise. I mean, literally like the global 50. That's where they want to make their money. And so if you were a 1,000-person company in Toledo, Ohio, you found that your price quadrupled and your partners no longer can sell the product, and you have to go direct, and you have to go to a subscription instead of perpetual license, and et cetera. All kinds of things changed. Maybe even products you were using got discontinued because that's no longer the focus. And so that's where kind of Scale comes in, right? So as you mentioned, one besides edge computing, the other big part of our business is what's now called re-virtualization, which is an analyst term that means not VMware, is what it means. I guess the analysts don't want to say not VMware, so they call it re-virtualization. But it's creating an alternative path, really for those types of companies. I mean, could one of those Fortune 50 companies use Scale for their virtualization? Of course they could, but where we have always been strong is in that mid-market, where, in mid-market, largely defined by smaller IT staff, right? You have 500 people in IT, there's other products you probably are going to use. You have 5 people in IT, you are going to want to take a look at this, right? That's the sweet spot for us. And that's not by coincidence how we ended up in edge computing. Because at the edge, you don't have any IT people. And so the feature set that we built for the very small IT staff lends itself very well into the new world of edge.
That's great. That's great. So you're a serial entrepreneur, and you saw something in the market. You saw this 3% in the VMware, that margin. You're like, you know what, I'm going to go after that. What has given you the confidence over and over again to just take on things like this? Even I remember you telling me about your email back, was it the email company that you had, and it was before AI was invented, and there's just this confidence in you that just keep going after like the next horizon. So where do you think that comes from?
Well, it's funny, right? Because the confidence comes from knowing that I don't know what I'm talking about. At first, right? So I mean, here's the true story of how Scale got started, right? So I have a notebook. I have a bunch of these notebooks. One of them is just out of reach here to my right. That I have ideas for businesses all the time, right? And by idea for business, I mean stuff I see that should get fixed. Right. I mean, it could be anything.
Right.
I have a habit of trying to write this stuff down. Most of the ideas are literally terrible. Like, they're just horrible, horrible ideas. And one of the things I always tell budding entrepreneurs is, your idea sucks. You just don't know how or why yet. Right. And so I go in with that mindset. Okay, I got ideas. My idea sucks. So when we started Scale, I literally in a notebook wrote down compete with VMware. Right, because I saw this 98% market share thing, and so just like idea number 87 in the book or whatever was compete with VMware, and I moved on. And then when it came time for me and my co-founders to actually start a company, we were looking through the idea book, right? What do we have? And we honed it on that one. And so I started calling. Again, this is, we didn't have any product or anything. Literally all we had was that one line in the notebook. So me and another guy were like, all right, well, let's go to VMware's website. And they had nicely listed all their best customers. I'm like, well, let's call them and see if they'd be willing to switch. And so I started calling them, and, my initial pitch was, hey, what if we did everything that VMware did and it was 30% cheaper, would you go for it? And they said no. I'm like, okay. And so then involved next call. I'm like, oh, but it's 50% cheaper. No, we wouldn't switch. And finally, I get a guy, and you know, a lot of times people hang up on you when you do this because they think you're selling something. But it's actually not too hard to do because you're not selling anything. Because I have nothing to sell. Like all I have is this concept, and
Right.
so
It was market
I get
research,
this.
really.
Yeah, it's market research, and I get this guy on the phone. And it's a law firm out in California, and I can tell he's willing, he's interested, right? He's interested in talking to the crazy guy who just cold called him about VMware. And so I said, well, hey, I'm like, what if it was free? What if I could do everything VMware did and it was free? And he said, no, I don't think I'd switch. And I'm like, I can't believe my idea is this bad, right? That I can't get anyone to take it for free. And finally I said, well, how much are you spending a year on VMware? And he said, $2 million. And I'm thinking to myself, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm offering this guy $2 million a year for free, and he says no. And so I said, are you sure it's 2 million? And he said, absolutely, because we just built a new data center and I have the invoice right here. It was $2 million. I said, well, how much was the data center? He said, $20 million. And then it dawned on me, oh, what I thought I was asking him was, could I save him 100% of $2 million? What he heard was if I went with a startup who I've never heard of, with a product I've never tried, and they could save me 10% of my data center, would I switch? And of course the answer is no, right? Like no one would do that. And so I said, well, what's the most expensive part of the data center? And he said, oh, by far the storage at the time. This is 15 years ago. The storage. And I said, what if I could save you 30% on storage? He said, I'd write you a check right now. I said, okay. Right, so now we've got something, and so the origin of Scale was actually that phone call, and then the first product we came out with was actually the storage component of what is now Scale Computing. It was only storage, and we were selling storage into VMware customers, and then as the market changed and we continued, eventually we did come out with our full virtualization VMware alternative suite, but we just started on the storage side. And I tell that story, I know it takes some time, but I tell that story because if I had just pushed forward and said, no, we're just doing the VMware alternative out the gate, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. Like no one would have bought that. So so my idea sucked, right? I had to learn why. And so, and I've done this a bunch of times, right? And again, I just know that's going to suck. And I think that the biggest lesson in all of that is like talk to the prospective customers first, right? Don't get way ahead of yourself. And you can't do this kind of thing out with research, right? You can't just like tap away at Google and ChatGPT and ask it these questions,
right?
Because you won't get what I got out of that conversation, right? You're going to get analyst reports and stuff like that, and it's no good. So anyway, it's what I do. So I really am I'm a product-driven guy, right? I mean, I basically see technologies and I see problems, and I'm like, oh, I could kind of piece that stuff together and come up with a solution. Other guys, and that's not the only way to do it, right? Some guys are like hardcore technologists and they invent like the newest thing, and it's like, that's not really me. I mean, I love tech, right? And I probably could do that stuff, but I'm more of a see what the technology is. I mean, like the AI anti-spam email security company, right? Like I studied neural network. I mean, all AI that we talk about now, large language model stuff, are based on neural networks, what are called neural networks. They were invented in the 60s. I studied them when I was in college, in the 90s, right? But computers were too slow. But then when we had this idea for anti-spam email security, I'm like, oh, well, I wonder if we could use that tech, right, to make this work, and it did, right? And they're expired now, but I have patents on that stuff, and the patents, look a lot like the way that ChatGPT works. It's just that the computing technology is, 3 orders of magnitude more now with GPUs and stuff than they were back, 25 years ago. So.
Well, what I like about your story is that you actually picked up the phone and you took a risk. And I'm sure a lot of people said no to you, wouldn't even, told you to pound sand. And then you got to the bottom of the issue. So I look at you as a problem solver, you've got that.
Yeah. I think it's, it's uncomfortable to make the phone call, right? And so what I
Totally.
always
Yep.
tell people to do is like make a list. So again, I went to the VMware website, made a big list. The key is make a big list and just hammer through them, because you get kind
Yep.
of, you'll get the rejections and you'll get the discomfort goes away after the first two or three calls. But
Yep.
if you do one and stop, and then okay, tomorrow I'm going to do another one, you're always uncomfortable. It's better just
Yep.
to kind of hammer through it. And the other thing I always tell myself, at one time I saw the statistic, and I have no idea if it's true, right? But I saw a statistic that said in the U.S. at any one time, 50% of working age adults are either actually starting a company or some kind of small business, or are thinking about that they could do some kind of small business. Now, most of them don't, right? But that's
Mm-mm.
that. So
Mm-hmm.
so I've always told myself, well, when you call somebody, like it's probably the most interesting call they're going to get all day, like because I don't actually have anything to sell them. So if I can get through the initial 15 seconds, I'm going to hang up on this guy. And I'm like, hey, I just need your help. I've got this business idea. And then you're sort of like, oh, that's kind of flattering, right? Like maybe I can help them. Then, by the way, when you actually do later have a product, those are the people you call. It's not
Yeah.
cold calls. That law firm was one of my first 5 customers at scale once we actually had the product. Right? I'm just saying, hey,
Right.
remember me? Of course he remembers you. So,
Yeah, they know you. They
yeah,
met you, right?
yeah. No, I talked to him for an hour and a half. Right? Like, so it's that's how I do it. But
These are good lessons for anybody listening, even if you don't feel like you're in sales, because we are selling and we're enrolling all of the time. So just getting through that initial, uncomfortableness, I think, is very important, especially now
yeah,
for a
and
lot of
if
people
you're
looking for work.
well,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
exactly. So if you're just trying to get a job, right? You're selling yourself, right? If
Yeah.
you're an entrepreneur and trying to get your business off the ground, you're always selling. I mean, I don't mean always the product. You're trying to hire employees. You need investors. You
Hmm.
need a bank to work with you. You need whatever, right? You're just
Yeah.
constantly given that pitch, and you like all things, you get better the more you do it.
Yep.
Right? Like I always tell, I have this little presentation I give sometimes called Jeff's Rules of Business, and one of the rules is you can't learn to shoot a basketball by reading books. Right? At some point, you have to pick the ball up and throw it. Now, after you've thrown the ball 1,000 times, does reading a book teach you something more? Probably, but it doesn't work the other way around. Right? You can't read a
True.
thousand books and magically shoot a free throw. Right? Like at some point, you got
Right.
to do it. So, I'm better at startups now than I was 30 years ago. And next
I
time
hope
I'll be
so.
better again. So yeah,
That's awesome.
hopefully,
Okay,
sometimes they don't
but
work, but
and
something,
I
that's
and I agree with you because we constantly have to, like, even for the podcast, I have to be like, uncomfortable, and follow up and track people
of
down,
course,
so
yeah,
any
of
any
course.
creative endeavor has that. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit. Where do you see computing headed in the next 5 years? Do you see it, being still with the edge, the cloud, hybrid, or maybe it's more sci-fi, something out of the Hitchhiker's Guide?
I do love the Hitchhiker's Guide.
Me too.
And we almost have the Babelfish, right? Like, I mean, you can just fire
Oh,
up
so
ChatGPT
close.
and it can pretty much do that stuff. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I think what's happening now. Again, Edge is still fairly new, but AI and other such technologies are pushing things to the edge. Cost is pushing things to the edge. It is hybrid, right? When I think of cloud computing, the reason that it was called cloud computing was this idea that the computing resources were just sort of everywhere, right? It didn't
Mm,
mean a big data center in Seattle. That isn't what
got
the
it.
cloud meant, right? It was anywhere. And so edge is really, in my mind, a completion of the cloud concept, right? You run the application wherever it makes the most sense. That might
Hmm.
be the data center in Seattle. That might be on your desk, right? I mean, it could
Right.
be any of those things, and it shouldn't matter. And so, technology continues to evolve where, at least from the IT side of things, it won't, it becomes sort of invisible. It doesn't have to be the IT admin who's deciding, like, hey, today we're going to run this app here and tomorrow we're going to run it there. It should, it can kind of move around and do its own thing. And, I think part of some of the reason that applications have gone to the cloud are very valid, right? Other reasons were because the CFO decided we were going to do an operating model instead of a CapEx model, and it's going to the cloud. And so you sort of force applications there that didn't belong there, and that
Mm-hmm.
causes its own set of problems, right? So
What
I
kind of
think that this will.
applications? What? Sorry to interrupt. What kind of
Yeah, yeah.
applications do you feel, shouldn't be on the cloud that maybe were forced up there?
Again, applications where the response time is much better locally. I mean, a simple example, because I've seen it a bunch, are companies that struggle. They're on the engineering side, and they went to virtual desktops for high-end CAD workstations.
Right. I was
And
just
they're like,
thinking
and all the
CAD was
engineers
probably
hate it because
one.
it's super slow. Like, of
Right.
course it's slow, right? That doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
Like, but they, and so that's a classic example. It's a classic IT mistake, right? Which is, oh, it's easier for the admin if it's virtual desktop. But the user
But not
experience
for the
for that
user.
use case, yeah,
Hmm.
it's horrible. Right now, if it's an office user who's just using Word and Excel, virtual desktop is great, right?
Right.
For that CAD user, and so the same thing's actually happening with AI, where you can run an application that uses AI, the equivalent of the GPU that's in my PlayStation in my basement, right? If you ran that 24/7 on Amazon, it would cost you about $3,500 a month. Now, a PlayStation is $400,
Right.
including stuff that isn't the GPU, right? So if I can run an AI application on that type of hardware, it's $400 one time if I buy it, and it's $3,500 a month on Amazon. Like, so there's reasons why. Now, if I'm only going to use it like for 1 hour one time, yeah, I don't need to buy the gear. But if I'm going to run it all day every day, then you do. So that's the kind of thing, that the trade offs that are
Got
are
it.
happening.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, so
Yeah.
AI, everybody's talking about AI, 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 and I'm sure you have a lot to say about it. But what I'm really interested in, and I did an episode about this right when I launched the Cyber Soul, is quantum computing. Do you have any thoughts about quantum and where
It's
what it
yeah. I
could
mean,
do in this space?
quantum computing is interesting, right? It's the practical uses for it right now are very limited, right? Like it's sort of like you almost have to like design the computer to do one thing,
Right.
and then maybe it works. And there are situations where it works. Obviously, there's extreme cost and everything, but the real promise of quantum computing boils down to you know sort of multiple exponential improvements in total computing power. Right. That's what it's really about. It wouldn't matter whether that breakthrough in computing came because of quantum computing or because you woke up tomorrow morning and thought of something brand new. If all of a sudden you could do 1,000 times the computations that we could do today, that's the
Hmm.
breakthrough, right? It's not
Right.
really how it gets done; it's the fact that it gets done. And if you can do that, um, who knows what happens? I mean, that's exactly what has happened with AI, right? Like
Right.
I said, the
For
concept of
sure.
neural networks and training neural networks on massive amounts of data. That's how my anti-spam system worked. That's how primitive AI worked in the 60s. The difference is GPUs have thousands of cores on them, and at the time that I was doing the anti-spam company, the best CPU, there were no GPUs, right? The best CPU was 2 cores, right? So I
Hmm.
could, for $1,000, I can buy something that has 1,000 times the capacity of what I had before. And so
And
and so what you're seeing now with the proliferation of AI is these effectively the cloud version of AI is what's dominating everybody's mind anyway. The ChatGPT and Grok and these kind of things, because they're building out these data centers with thousands and thousands of these GPUs in them, and it's because you get all this concentration. But again, one breakthrough, the equivalent of now there's a new kind of processor that can do 1,000 times what a GPU can do. Like all that stuff's immediately outdated, right? And
right.
so what'll happen then? I mean, in your world with cybersecurity, the risk of something like quantum computing or equivalent is like all encryption is broken, right? Because you can
Yep,
brute force
that's it.
anything, right?
Yep,
Now,
that's the
of
fear.
course, what'll happen is you'll turn around and you'll invent software that will encrypt at that level, or the
Deal with
whatever the
that. Yeah.
equivalent is, right? Yeah, I mean,
Right.
it's an arms race. It's always an arms race, right? That's what cybersecurity is.
Mhm.
So but it's a really interesting thing. The other thing that really I think is not talked about enough in the world of AI is AI assisted application development. So about 60% of AI usage is actually used by engineers using AI to
Right.
do stuff, right? It's not so you can get a, recipe for something. It's, it's that.
Hmm.
And the beauty is that now with those tools, people who don't have formal training in computer science can, in some cases, completely make their own applications, or at least make meaningful contributions to a team that does make that kind of application.
Right.
And so I have seen real world customers where they are deploying. Here's I'll give you a specific example, right? So I'll use my gas station. So we do have a bunch of customers in Edge that are like gas stations.
Hmm.
You can imagine, right, how many applications a year previously would they deploy at a gas station? On average, I'm sure the answer was less than one, right? Like they had the point of sale system and maybe video surveillance, and that's probably all that ran there. And every once in a while, they had to update it, right? Well, now you can start running AI out at that gas station. It'll run on, like, I mean, I've got one here, like, a little device like this, right? Like a little tiny computer. But there's a GPU in there. And so this particular customer was telling me, like, oh, we were working on an app to use the video cameras, point the video camera at, I'm not making this up, at the hot dog roller so
Okay.
that the system could alert the person at the store when they needed to put more hot dogs on the roller. And the
Wow.
reason they wanted to do that is because the way they did it before is there was a checklist, and once an hour or two, whenever the alarm went off, the person was supposed to walk over there and check it. And when they walk over there and check it, the guy who comes in to buy his cigarettes, who likes to talk to that person's not there. The guy might not buy cigarettes that day. The store makes less money. Like, this is what they think about in that world.
Hmm.
Okay,
Wow.
so they made this application. It's easy, right? It's easy. It worked. However, in the traditional world of software development, what are the odds that anybody would ever create a hot dog roller monitoring software?
Right.
Not happening, right? Not
Right.
happening. These guys, they did that. They made once that worked, they're like, oh, we have cameras pointed at the fuel pumps. We can basically detect human movement and see when somebody's having trouble. Like, they need help
Wow.
at the pump, something screwed up. So all of a sudden they deployed like 14 apps in a year. Now, 14 apps doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about a gas station with thousands of locations, it's a lot. And every one of
Hmm.
those little apps makes them more efficient or makes them a little bit more money. And if
Yeah.
you're the company, if you're their competitor and you're producing one application every 5 years and they're producing 15 applications a year, right? A few years from now, you're obliterated. Like, you're not even competitive anymore, right? Like, that's
Right.
the difference. And I see that. I use the gas station as like the extreme example, but I see this use of AI to create new applications that basically were never going to get created before is a really interesting area that people are less
Yeah.
aware of than they probably should be.
Because the expert gets to actually create the app as opposed to trying to explain it to the app developer, which, if you've ever worked with an app developer, is a completely different language sometimes, right?
That's exactly right. Like, you have the tribal knowledge. Like, you wouldn't, like, a software house would never have known that hot dog roller timing was a problem. Like, you just wouldn't think that, but somebody has that knowledge, and they
Awesome.
can make one simple application that suddenly makes the world that much better. And though, the proliferation of those tiny little applications, you don't need to run that in the cloud, right? That runs on one tiny little GPU, and
Hmm.
along with the other apps, right? It's a very simple application, but it's impactful. It has a big impact on their actual business. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. So, before we wrap up, because we're almost to the 30-minute mark, I do want to talk about your leadership style because in May, I got to go to your scale computing platform event and I ended up talking to a lot of your employees, and they are just the happiest employees. They're just very, very, there's a good culture there. And, cultures are created by leaders. So I'm just wondering, how did you build that kind of culture? I mean, your co-founder has pink hair, so I mean, I'm all
He
about
does
that.
have. He didn't always have pink hair, but I don't hold that against him. He's fine. Pink hair
I
becomes
used to
part of
have
his
pink hair
brand.
too, so
Yeah, right, right. It's personal branding, so it's all good. Yeah, I think, I am a, I mean, you're right. I mean, cultures are a reflection um, of the leadership, right? And my approach. Yeah, I mean, earlier I said I'm a problem solver, right? Like that is my approach even with the team, right? Like
yeah.
I'm not a micromanager personally. I hire people because I trust that they're going to do what they need to do, and I look for ways to help them, right? Whatever it may be, and try to if they need my help, ask for help. If they don't, that's fine. But I mean that at like every level of the business has been my strategy. So I if you were a brand new salesperson, so our entry level salesperson are literally the people who we get leads. They have to call the leads and see if they're legitimate, right? So you've probably
Yeah.
got called because you came to the booth at a trade show, right? So you're that person,
Business
right? They're right
development
out of
rep. Yep.
college. Yeah, they're right out of college or whatever, and I will uh, still rate. I mean, I see all the leads come in. We have a little feed, right? I see the leads come in. I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I actually know what you could say to that person because I have. I mean, literally, there's like I see a lead that comes in from Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I'm like, oh, I have a friend that lives there. So, like, tell them that I have a friend that lives there, or I'll email them, right? It doesn't bother me. Like, I'll email them and copy the sales rep who was going to, right? Because I'll get the conversation started, and then the sales rep is thrilled because I helped them, like, make their numbers or whatever. But then the sales rep knows that's how we work, right? So then they'll do
Mhm.
that for somebody else, and it's sort of this like, you don't have
Yeah.
to stay in your silo. You just kind of, you know, I guess it's lead from the front, right? I don't know. It's just like I don't even. Sometimes I'm like, what is it I do around here, right? It's like I'm just trying to like help solve these problems.
Yeah.
And just like I was using products to solve customer problems and trying to solve problems inside the company, and try to have fun doing it, right? I mean, it's hard work. All businesses are hard work. It's not like
Yeah.
startups are uniquely hard. Everything's hard, right? I mean, sometimes people maybe decide to want to coast and not try that hard, but that's not how I work. I try to, I love this stuff, right? So everyone knows I will work. I'll
Right.
do whatever. So.
That's awesome. So what's the biggest leadership lessons you've learned?
Um, I think that one of the things, and I just said it, right, but company cultures come from within. You can't like just say this is the culture, like
Yeah.
words on paper. Like that isn't
Right.
because that's not what happens, right? Like it has to kind of emerge, and if people have information about what's going on, and feel like they have authority to do something, then
Mhm.
they usually do. I think that one of the key lessons, particularly um, as you're bringing on uh, managers, even entry, brand new manager, right? I always say try to align the the responsibility, the authority, and the accountability all together. It's easy to not do that, right? It's easy to give somebody responsibility, but actually have not given them the authority to do it, or to say you're accountable for this, but like somebody else is sort of like responsible. You get that mismatch. And
Yeah.
if you intentionally think about it, it's easier to catch. But if you don't intentionally think about it, it's easy to miss. And that just leads to frustration because somebody says, "Well, I'm supposed to do this, but I actually can't make the decision," or
Yeah.
I'm going to get in trouble if this doesn't happen, but I can't fix it. Right? That people get frustrated with that kind of thing. So trying to match that, responsibility, accountability, and authority is pretty
That's
key,
great.
especially as you grow a business. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I'm definitely going to write
yeah.
that down because I've personally experienced pieces of that. So I know that frustration very well.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think a lot of, I've done it, right? I mean, it's not like I was just born and had these ideas in my head. Like I made the mistakes that like led to
Right.
realizing some of this stuff. In many cases, early stage companies, startups, you have a leader or leaders to begin with, the founders, and as things get more complicated, you start hiring people, and you naturally start hiring worker bees, right, to do the stuff that you no longer have time to do.
Right.
That's fine, and that works for a while, but at some point you have to hire managers, like
Leaders.
who
Yeah.
can come in and leaders who can come in and do stuff. You might be able to promote them from within, but like they have to exist in some
Yeah.
way. That's harder to part with. Some people never do it, right? Some companies just, I mean, they just like it's always like kind of centralized. But
Hmm.
it's if you do it and you do it right, it's magical things happen. Like people are smart, right? So if you hire smart
Yeah.
people, they can do stuff, and it always feels like, oh, if I can't really, I have to do that. No one else will know how to do that. You'd be surprised, right? Like other
Yeah.
people can figure out how to do it. So
And do it better sometimes, and that's okay.
very often, yeah, very often. Yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap up, but is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience about scale computing, about the future of computing, anything, or a leadership
Well,
tip?
look, I'd say anybody out there, if you're in that world who's sort of trapped or uncertain by what's happening with VMware, check us out. We're not going to be everybody's solution, but please do. And on the edge computing side, whether it's a fit for you right now or not, it's worth, if you're in tech, it's worth spending a little bit of time and exploring what's happening there, because
Yeah.
it is kind of a whole new frontier, and there's a lot going on. So
Yeah. Well, I liked how you brought up the virtual desktop because a lot of us, especially in tech, are working out of home offices now.
yeah.
So, time is money, man. Right.
Yep,
So,
exactly. Well, I mean, I've seen so many. It's silly. I've seen examples where a company buys a laptop and then puts virtual desktop on it, and then the whole thing runs slow when the computing resources are literally sitting there on the laptop. Like you don't,
right.
like you could just use the laptop. But anyway,
Yeah.
so it's again silly things that sometimes happen. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's the world of IT. Well,
yep,
anyways,
yep.
Jeff, thank you so much. This was so inspiring and very clarifying for me, especially with the edge computing part. For listeners, you can check out scalecomputing.com or connect with Jeff on LinkedIn. And don't forget, if you love this episode, please share it with your friends and your colleagues and leave us a review. And make sure you don't miss an episode. You can visit thecybersoul.io to sign up for our email list and explore past episodes. Jeff, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. It was fun.